Earlier this month, Akira Toriyama passed away. The creator of Dragon Ball, the artist for Dragon Quest, and so much more. Akira Toriyama is... that was a death that really hit hard for me. I love Dragon Ball. If you follow me on social media or even just on this YouTube channel, if you know me, if you've talked to me, you know that Dragon Ball is a very important series to me. And that's because it's a uniquely Akira Toriyama work. His art style is so unique, it's instantly recognizable. Dragon Ball is something that really carried me through my early childhood into my teen years, and even now, I still love Dragon Ball. I think about it a lot. Like, Dragon Ball is something very deeply important to me. But in light of his passing, a lot of people honoring him and, sharing his work on social media since he passed, a lot of people were really focusing on Dragon Quest because he was the artist and character designer for Dragon Quest. And Dragon Quest is a series that I have very little experience with. I've talked about it in some cases on this channel. Dragon Quest Monsters last year, I did play through that, or I didn't finish it, but I played 20 hours of it, and I really enjoyed it. But despite my love for Dragon Ball, despite my adoration for Akira Toriyama as an artist, as a creator, I've never actually played a mainline Dragon Quest game. So today I want to talk about my experience with Dragon Quest, learning to love Dragon Quest, and talk about Dragon Quest XI a little bit because I am about 40 hours into that game right now, and it is a very, very good game. Let's get into it. Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Botox Games, and today we are talking about learning to love Dragon Quest. Now, I got some comments on a similar video I made last year titled Learning to Love Final Fantasy, kind of just being like, oh, you're just a kid, you shouldn't have to learn to love Final Fantasy, these are some of the greatest games ever made. I don't mean learning to love in that context. It's not like it's a struggle to love Dragon Quest or to love Final Fantasy, but it's just a series that's, I've wanted to get into, or a series I've thought about getting into pretty much my entire life in both of these cases, but just haven't really done. I'm pretty into Final Fantasy now. Final Fantasy 14 especially has taken over my life for the past year and a half. But Dragon Quest is really a franchise, despite my adoration of Akira Toriyama, it's really a franchise I just have little experience with. And since he passed, since I saw so many people on Twitter talking about Dragon Quest, I decided to finally take the plunge. I was like, okay, I love this man's work and his character design. I've seen the slimes, I've seen the enemies in Dragon Quest, right? I decided it was finally time to take the plunge and play a mainline Dragon Quest game. Now, my decision on which game to play first was pretty easy. Dragon Quest XI-S on the Switch. Most Dragon Quest games are pretty pricey. I do have the Trilogy Pack on Switch as well of the first 3 games, but I figured as a newbie to the franchise, it was either going to be 8 or 11. I have 8 on 3DS as well, but I figured 11 would be the best way for me to get into the franchise, and in terms of a more, concrete mainline sense, because it's the most modern Dragon Quest game. It has the most modern design sensibilities of any Dragon Quest game, so I figured as a newbie to the franchise, that would be the best option, and I must say I am loving it. But before we talk more about Dragon Quest XI, I do want to kind of just give some history on Dragon Quest here, in terms of my history with the franchise, because similar to Final Fantasy, although Final Fantasy I definitely played more growing up in certain aspects, Dragon Quest is a series I basically didn't play at all. I remember seeing Dragon Quest Monsters Joker on the DS, as well as Dragon Quest IX on the DS at my local Toys R Us or Sam's Club or something, and thinking, oh, those games look interesting. In fact, I actually remember one of my friends saying, hey, get Dragon Quest IX, we should play it together. Obviously, I never did. At that point, I wasn't really playing JRPGs, I'm in my mid-20s just about, so I was old enough to be playing Dragon Quest VIII on PS2 or something if I had it. I just didn't really play JRPGs that much growing up outside of Pokemon. So Dragon Quest is a series that always looked kind of cool, but JRPGs were very overwhelming to me, right? Up until the time that I played, I want to say Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in 2017, even then, JRPGs were still it was a big deal if I managed to get through a JRPG. Now I play them almost back to back, but back then, it was a lot to get into, a big 50 to 100 hour adventure. That was a lot for me to devote some time to. Even as a kid, my attention span, I guess, isn't that great, but the point is, Dragon Quest, even back on the DS, was a franchise I wanted to get into, but I just never did. It also hasn't helped in the past couple of years that, as a YouTuber, as someone who gets a lot of enjoyments out of playing games and then discussing them with friends and other people on the internet, a lot of people haven't even played Dragon Quest. So to me, as someone who's relatively new to both franchises, I've played, I want to say, maybe half of the mainline Final Fantasies at this point. Typically speaking, I'm gonna pick, Final Fantasy over Dragon Quest if I'm gonna pick a 50-hour game to play, because I can talk about Final Fantasy with my friends who have also played Final Fantasy, 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, whatever. Whereas with Dragon Quest, I don't know a single person. I am not friends with a single person, at least as far as I'm aware, that has really played any Dragon Quest except for maybe 11. Like, I don't know anybody who's played Dragon Quest 5. So for me, the choice was always down to, well, if I'm gonna play an RPG, I'm gonna play Final Fantasy because it's much more prominent in the West. I know that reasoning might sound stupid to some people, but let me be here, okay? But, I did play some spin-offs growing up for Dragon Quest. I played Dragon Quest Heroes on the PS4 back when that came out. I remember I got it for Christmas one year, and that was before I really found my love for the Warriors games. I love the Warriors games. Hyrule Warriors, even back when, 360, I played Dynasty Warriors 5 Empires, I want to say, with my brother. Dynasty Warriors is a series I really enjoy. Dragon Quest Heroes, very enjoyable game, but not really that indicative of the actual Dragon Quest experience. I just knew I liked it because A, Warriors game, and B, Akira Toriyama character designs. And then from there, I played a lot of Dragon Quest Builders and Dragon Quest Builders 2 when those came out on the Nintendo Switch. I'm not really a huge Minecraft fan or anything, but Dragon Quest Builders was very easy to get into as a new fan of Dragon Quest, I guess. There was very low stakes, Those games are pretty peaceful to just get into and play, even though they are still pretty deep games. It was just, I don't know, it was easier to play those games to me than hop into a mainline Dragon Quest at the time. And then even late last year with Dragon Quest Monsters 3, The Dark Prince, I played a lot of that game. I didn't finish it. I put 20 hours into it. I really want to go back to it and finish it up because, as the Pokemon comparison there, as a huge Pokemon fan, I really enjoyed what I played of Dragon Quest Monsters of the Dark Prince, and I would love to go back and play even more Dragon Quest Monsters games, but I think for now I will focus more on the mainline stuff. So, talking more about Dragon Quest XI's, that's the game I decided to play. I'm loving this game, man. I'm about 40 hours in. I'll probably do a separate video once I finish it, but just, without talking spoilers, I'm about maybe 3 hours into Act 2, and it's funny because, I'll talk about this in a minute, just going through and kind of learning about all of these games and all these different versions, I didn't realize how much they actually added to the Switch version of Dragon Quest XI with the 11S version. I know it came to PS4 and Xbox and Steam as well, but the interludes in between Act 1 and 2, those were so good. That was a highlight of the game so far for me. I really enjoyed seeing what Eric and Rab and Jade and these characters were doing in between Act 1 and 2. So it's I would have been burned if I played Dragon Quest XI on the PS4 and then 11S came out a year later. I feel like if I were a Dragon Quest fan at that point, that would have been a burn. But yeah, I mean, as someone who likes JRPGs, but as I said, it's just kind of hard to get into them sometimes. Dragon Quest XI is the most pure RPG. It is so absolutely filled pack with just every JRPG trope you can imagine. Oh, you're the destined hero. Oh, a character has amnesia. Oh, this and that. It is a very tropey JRPG, but and maybe it just comes down to when you try to play a game like this. I can understand someone playing this and not really liking it, but I don't know, man. It's really hitting right now. This game is so enjoyable. The turn-based combat is simple. Yes, it really is. But the team building's fun. You have, for the most part, 7 characters throughout the game, and they're all incredibly likable. They all have nice playstyles and different playstyles. Building that team comp has been a lot of fun. The skill trees are a lot of fun to go through, and the game is just beautiful. And exploring the world is fun. Seeing all the different monster designs, of course, going back to Akira Toriyama. I've always appreciated the design of a slime, but then you see a she slime and you're like, oh, okay. I see what you're cooking, Akira Toriyama. I feel like I really do appreciate this world more now than I would have if I played it maybe another time. I think it really just came down to playing it right here, right now, and engrossing myself in this world. After Akira Toriyama's passing, this was the game I needed to play, and it's really damn good. I don't want to say too much because I'll do a separate video just on Dragon Quest XI's once I finish it. I'll go into full spoilers on that video, but as my first mainline Dragon Quest game, I am loving the, albeit pretty simple story. I'm loving the story. I love the characters. I love the world. I love the monster designs. I love the character designs. I love the combats. Even just grinding out, there's a part, I think, in Dundrasil where you can, like, run into a bunch of metal slimes, like 4 in a row next to a dragon. You know, as someone who's, like, new to Dragon Quest, one of the only things I knew was, like, oh, metal slime equal XP. So I just kind of stayed there for, like, 5 hours just grinding. The game's pretty easy. You don't really need to grind, quite frankly, but I kind of just wanted to be over-leveled for a little bit, so I just sat there while I was watching Curb Your Enthusiasm, grinding metal slimes, and even that, like, I know people don't like grinding in games, and once again, you don't really need to do it in this game, unless you're doing, like, the Draconian stuff, but that was really fun. I don't know, this game, it goes back to what I was saying. I think I'm just playing it at the right time, but it is hitting right now. But beyond that, I do want to talk a little bit about the franchise as a whole, and my plan in terms of, you know, continuing my way through. I know a lot of people have already replied to me on Twitter saying, hey, Dragon Quest VIII should be in the next game you play. And that might be what I do, but I do have a copy of Dragon Quest IX. I actually just bought it because, as I mentioned earlier, my friend really wanted to play it growing up. Although I don't think we'd be playing it multiplayer now. It's a game I've always been very interested in. So while it might be a bit of an odd choice, I think I might go to Dragon Quest IX after this. I'm looking at like 4, 5, and 6 on eBay. I know I could emulate them, but I prefer owning a physical copy. Those games are very expensive, especially Dragon Quest V, which, as I've learned, Dragon Quest V is like the fan favorite next to 11, next to 8. So I would love to go through and play all of them, but I'm going to take my time. You know, I'm not going to rush through this just to say I finished all of these games, but I do think 9 will be the next one. Now, something that I've noticed in my current hyperfixation on Dragon Quest, if you ask my girlfriend, she could attest, I have been talking about nothing but Dragon Quest over the past 2 weeks. I am absolutely obsessed with Dragon Quest XI, but also just this franchise as a whole, and kind of watching content based around it. There's not really that many Dragon Quest YouTubers, or people really just covering these games in thorough detail. There's a couple, like Cappy Console Gamer. He does a lot of cool Dragon Quest stuff, but there's really just not like an American or even just Western YouTuber that just really, really dives deep into Dragon Quest. There is a viewer on my channel, I think it's Mila's Game Room. She did a great like video talking about all of the spin-offs on 3DS. I definitely recommend that. But there's just not that many videos, which has been very surprising to me. I know Dragon Quest is niche here, but like, you're telling me there's no one that's just making like really, really in-depth videos about, I don't know, the Terry's Wonderland remake on 3DS, or even just Dragon Quest Monsters Joker 3. Like, I feel like there's just not that much content about these games on YouTube. Even the newer games like Dragon Quest Treasures and Infinity Trash, like, the big outlets posted their reviews and that was about it. It's something that I've been kind of surprised to see, just the lack of content creators based on Dragon Quest. So if this video does well, if my Dragon Quest XI review, once I get to it, does well, maybe I'll become a Dragon Quest YouTuber, guys. Maybe I'll start covering Dragon Quest, because even stuff like Rocket Slime, I would love to try. Those games look really cute. So we'll see. And that's not even talking about Dragon Quest X. I went down a crazy rabbit hole last week, kind of just learning about Dragon Quest X. Last year, in my Learning to Love Final Fantasy video, I talked a lot about Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV is my first MMO experience, and, you know, I'm not caught up by any means. I'm in Stormblood right now, which is, you know, I'm like 200 hours into Final Fantasy XIV. It's, you know, no number to scoff at, but also I know people have thousands of hours. So I still have a ways to go there, but as my first MMO experience, I really, really enjoyed Final Fantasy XIV. And it just, I understand the Dragon Quest fans, like Happy Console Gamer, that are just sad that Dragon Quest X hasn't been localized, and even like John Cartwright over at Good Vibes Gaming, I know he's made videos about it. Dragon Quest X, that game needs to be localized, or at least the offline version. There's so many versions of it. I actually have some of them on Wii U. You can see them in the stack back there, not really, but I have some of the versions on Wii U because I'm going for a full Wii U set, even though you can't play it on Wii U. I think maybe unless you use like a VPN or something. That's just like 7 full Dragon Quest stories that haven't been localized. And I know there's like fan patches, but man, that's crazy. I would love to play Dragon Quest X. If that game ever got localized, I would totally play it after I have fallen in love with Final Fantasy XIV. Come on, Square Enix, you know what you got to do. At least the offline version. You got to do it, Square Enix. So yeah, that is going to do it for today's video. I just wanted to hop on here and gush about Dragon Quest as a franchise. It is, I get it, you know, it's something that you really just don't hear people talking about that much. As evident by the outcry of support for my tweet saying like, oh, I'm starting Dragon Quest 11, all the diehard Dragon Quest fans are saying like, oh my god, finally more people are really, giving Dragon Quest a chance in the West. Yeah, we need to push for this franchise, man. This is a deeply important and special JRPG franchise, and as a new member of the Dragon Quest the fandom here, we gotta keep up. We gotta keep pushing, fellas. We gotta keep it real here and keep people, trying out these games and learning more. And I will be, sharing my journey with you all. I'm excited. It's kind of like when I played Yakuza last year. It's like I have so many good games to play now. Like I always knew I would like Dragon Quest, but now that I actually got my foot through the door, it's like, oh man. I am eating right now as a new Dragon Quest fan because there's just so many games, so many spin-offs. Dragon Quest Monsters is a franchise with like 7 games to go through. Like, I'm eating right now, man. There's so many games for me to play now. But I'll be taking my time and updating you as I go through. As I mentioned, I'll do a video on Dragon Quest 11S, so subscribe if you want to see that. And let me know in the comments below. If you are a Dragon Quest fan, how did you get into the franchise? And if you're not a Dragon Quest fan, what's stopping you from getting into it? I would love to get a conversation going down in the comments below. Of course, if you are new here and you are a Dragon Quest fan, I mostly cover Nintendo stuff and Nintendo news and first-party games from them, but I will be doing more Dragon Quest content, absolutely, as I play through these games and do maybe some more retro throwback reviews on them, because, man, I'm definitely a Dragon Quest fan now, I can tell you that much.